Everybody, welcome back to the last installment of Super May, a sad time because it is the last one. But man, this month has flown by, just like this last story. All Star Superman. SB, hit him with that flyby real quick.
I wasn't ready.
Boom, there you go. All Star Superman, the 12-issue miniseries that was released by DC in 2005, written by Grant Morrison, art by Frank Quietly. All Star Superman, the last of Superman stories, the most recent one, right? Inspired by the Silver Age of Superman. It really explores the more mythical side of Superman in certain ways. But the down low, quick Spark Notes version of the story, Superman gets sun poisoning after Lex Luthor plans for him to on a mission gone awry. And now he basically is going to die. It's going to kill him. And what does he do with that time? How does he use that time to continue to be Superman? And they tell it through these 12 issues. But SB, I'm going to kick it over to you first because you read Superman, All Star Superman a year ago. How did you feel reading it a year ago, and how did you feel rereading it for this video? Now, especially since we've reread all these other stories or read all these other stories about Superman.
Feeling like an all-star. As cliche as that is. But All-Star Superman was the very first Superman comic I have ever read in my entirety of being alive. I don't know why I made that so dramatic, but
It's all right.
it was my first Superman book, so it was interesting. I remember being super hooked into it. I had a nice reading session last February for it when I first got it and took a little break and then got back to it and binged like the final like 5 or 6 issues in another setting. And for me, I thought what it did very well is just kind of like getting me into the Superman mythos and lore of the character. And it's funny to look back that one of my biggest criticisms for whatever happened to Man of Tomorrow during that video that we did, and just kind of like the first time I read it, I didn't like a couple of the Silver Age things that happened in there, and just thought some of the elements in there were just kind of like weird for Superman comics. But in All Star, I kind of gave him the pass just because I didn't really know much at that time from being like a first time reader. So going back and rereading it kind of made me appreciate whatever happened to Man of Tomorrow a little bit more. And going back and rereading it also kind of made me think For All Seasons is a little better.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. But All Star still has a sweet spot in my heart because it pretty much introduced me to Superman. I never knew much about Superman before I read it. It kind of opened my eyes into how cool he is when it comes to time travel and like just being like having like a council of Supermen across time. I growing up, I never really knew that. Like I said, I wasn't too familiar with Superman lore before this. Um, so it was cool to learn about all that, and then just still kind of get the core of him being a human and just facing such a threat of sun poisoning, which is essentially his form of cancer, and kind of humanizing and seeing like what he sets out to do throughout those 12 issues to make sure his legacy is left behind in like a good way. And it's just beautiful. The artwork was captivating. I liked everything about this book. And I do have this panel up right now on my iPad, which is just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's clean. It just screams like he's flying to the sun to save the world with a smile on his face. Just because, even though he doesn't know the true ramifications of what it's going to do to him. And there's so many panels that we'll could probably get into in here that stick out to us. And it just, I really enjoyed it. Really, really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's a cool perspective, especially it being your first Superman story. I think it's a very interesting one just because I personally don't feel like it's as beginner friendly to people. Just because Grant Morrison as a writer has more of this like not hodgepodge, but like sometimes with the stories that they make is more abstract. It's not
Yeah.
as linear as like we would like for it to be. And that does go into All-Star Superman. But for you to be able to pick all that up from it just goes to show how well the writing is and how well the
Yeah.
Superman character is portrayed in this book. But Lou, how about you?
I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. It was, of all the ones we've read to this point, I think this is the one that it feels very heartfelt, but it feels heavy. And there's a level of sadness, especially with the way it starts. And like, he's dying and he's keeping it a secret, which is funny because like he still has a secret. It's like, oh, you're Superman? And he's like, yeah. But what I didn't tell you is I'm dying. You know what I mean? So like you
Yeah.
still get that secretive element of where you don't know what his motivations are for some of the characters, right? With Lois, Lana not knowing, Jimmy not knowing. And to your point, I think the first time I did read it, it didn't feel as accessible because I'm like, it just feels like I should know some of these things. And some things I do, some things I don't. But once you read a little bit more, and then obviously in a reread, and you take each issue on its own, it does feel abstract and kind of like it's out there like, where is this going? And then by the end you're like, it lands. It's this crazy gymnastics routine sometimes, and you're just like, I've never seen that before. And then they stick the landing and everyone cheers, and you're like, oh damn. Okay. Like that's how I felt over and over and over again. And this version of Superman, which again is not kind of like a remake of Superman, it's not a retelling, but it's definitely feels like an homage to the character for sure. But it feels very personal. And now that you know the story of Grant Morrison and like his connection and the why behind it, you see a lot of that come through, which we'll talk about in a little bit here for James Gunn. But I really enjoyed the side characters most in All Star out of the four that we've read. I thought Jimmy was great in this, probably the most interesting Jimmy we've gotten to this point, especially when he turned into Doomsday. I thought that was legit. Lex felt really good in this story as well. Lois felt very different. Perry felt very, very good. Even some of the other characters like Bizarro, you get the Bizarro world, you're just like, okay, there's connections. Everyone has a connection to him. But at the end of each issue, you get Superman being Superman, and he's doing things that Superman would do. And I thought that was interesting. But again, the big thing that stuck out after every issue is you just felt this underlying sadness for him. I felt sad for him. If I would have like been current in this time, I bet you this book would have crushed me probably.
Which I think for a lot of people, that's what sticks with them, especially going back and reading like a lot of reactions online to people coming out and being like, yeah, I kept up with this book. I mean, this book came out in a 3-year span from 2005 and in 2008. Yeah, like you read, especially some of those back end issues, I want to say from like 9 through 12. Like, yeah, those are the bigger, more heavier ones that will stick with people to this day.
Even the Jonathan Kent issue that had me going.
Yeah. There's so many great moments in this book. And I think that's the big piece that I really like about it is that even though it does feel like episodic, it felt like I was reading the Superman. Yeah, but it felt like it was reading the Superman animated series in a book.
Yeah.
And that was cool because I don't think any of the other ones did that. The other ones felt like very much so they're going through one story entirely. This one felt, and maybe it is the fact that they call each issue an episode, but it felt like I was reading that, and there was something nostalgic about that. And when you do read All Star Superman, even though this is a more modern book, I don't know about you guys, but overall, I did have this feeling of like nostalgia, reflectiveness, because that is the things that Superman is going through as he's like doing all of these different things to try to both make up for the time that he's lost, maybe per se, in terms of like, for example, going back and having his final moments with his dad, going back and or going and showing Lois what he really feels for her in many different ways.
Yeah.
Even trying to help Lex out and trying to get him to snap out of that hatred that he has for Superman. So many cool moments that at its core show, again, Superman as the kind-hearted character that he is.
Yeah.
All of these books have done it.
Yeah.
It's a celebration, and All-Star does it no differently. It doesn't try to deconstruct the character. It just celebrates who he is. And you look at like a lot of the things that he does face in this book, and you would think like, man, that would break so many other heroes. But he always rises up to the occasion, despite being sick, despite dying. And you're like, man, that is Superman.
You know what, though? There's two really interesting points that stick out to me that I think are some of, if not my top two biggest highlights of this book. And one is this is a very humble Superman. He does some insane feats in this book from episode 1 to 12. But he's so humble, even as Clark, the clumsy fool who's tripping over stuff. And he gets in that prison and he's talking to Lex and he's like, Lex, I think you and Superman could have been friends. I think you could have done good in this world. I think you could have used your talents to save people. Just wasn't in the cards for you at this point. But like all of these times, even on Bizarro World, I think that was probably the biggest one. Probably one of the lesser, like I wasn't as necessarily interested in that specific story. But when I was done reading that story, I was like, this guy, how many heroes are just like, I'm Superman, right? Or I'm the guy. I'm not going to ask for your help. I'm not going to, and I think they do that with Zabaro in there. And then whatever, Jor-El is backwards. I can't remember. But they showcase the grant. Yeah.
Eldor or something like that.
Yeah. They showcase of like, we're above these people. Like I'm 1 in 5 million. Like I'm the best of the best. And they're like, I'm not going to spend time talking to them. Like they're not good enough. I can't talk to them. I want poetry and all this kind of stuff. And he realizes that I need their help. I'm willing to do what you're not willing to do. And you're willing to change people. In this one, I'll say this. He feels very much like a shonen main character of like your main character influences everyone that you're around and they change them for the better. That's really how I feel about this version of Superman and Grant Morrison.
That's a really good analogy. I don't know why I never picked up on that.
It feels that way for sure.
Yeah, I guess the Bizarro World, like you just mentioned, huge case in point of that.
Yeah,
I like seeing the Flash in not Reverse Flash, but I like seeing the
Bizarro Flash. Yeah,
Snail Flash.
Yeah, but and even to that point though, the way that he does sacrifice for a lot of the things and how that does influence on people, where like one big moment that did stick out to me is when he does ultimately not try to spend time with Pa. They're like, if that moment, the Supermen of the future are like, if you didn't do that, like we're not here. Like the future isn't secured if you don't sacrifice for us. And like the weight that puts on Superman, but how he handles it in such a, like you said, humble and like kind way, just it goes so far.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. There's just something really cool about it. And maybe this kind of leads to the next question that I have. And SB, I'll throw this one over to you because a big part of it, and something that a lot of people do pick up on, is how this parallels in certain ways the 12 labors of Hercules, where Hercules, after killing his family, now has to atone for what he did and takes on 12 like almost impossible labors. And Superman is doing this not in atonement, but because he is going to die. One could see that and think, oh, so they're making him a godlike creature, or a godlike figure, or a demigod-like figure, like we see in something like, for example, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. So, SB, why do you feel like All-Star Superman handled this better versus something like Man of Steel? especially with such a big theme like that?
It's I just rewatched Man of Steel recently, so that's a great question. It just portrays like you don't have to. I think it has the edge over Man of Steel a little bit because like we know what the Superman's about and like an older version of it, whereas Man of Steel is like the true origin, and we never really like got to the point where this Superman's at, so it's a little hard to compare.
Mhm.
But they still cracked his like just sense of saving the everyday person in All Star compared to what Man of Steel did. Like he couldn't even save his dad in that from a tornado, and that was kind of interesting. I didn't know later on in the movie when big one of the big things I noticed on the rewatch was he literally is the reason why Zod destroys Metropolis because he literally takes them and flies them like all the way over there instead of staying in like the cornfield area that he originally landed in. I don't think All Star Superman would have done that, but then that's also like this All Star Superman is more experienced than that Superman was. But it still just captured the whole hopefulness of and humanity that it captured the humanity more so than Man of Steel did. Because I feel like Man of Steel did a big emphasis on like, oh, like you're Kryptonian, and like once he discovered he was a Kryptonian and from Krypton, that's pretty much what the whole rest of the movie was about. It was like, oh, like I need to like they kind of like forgot his human side a little bit.
Yeah. And I think too, with those points that you had for like the movies, I think one thing the book did really well and Grant Morrison really showcased was the fact that like he didn't feel like this god like character of like bow and worship me, but he does feel like, here you said, he feels different from all the other heroes, and it feels like he went from being like, let's say you have someone who's like A plus tier, right? For my tier ranking people out there, I feel like you take him and you move him in the S tier and he's in a tier all by himself at the end of this. And all the things that he went through, I think they did showcase probably better than the other 3 books that we read, of like, he feels like he's the smartest in this, but it doesn't feel like it was just like a given. He had to earn it. He feels the strongest, but he always has to earn it. He feels like he's like the most philosophically grounded, where he can go toe to toe as Clark or Superman against Lex, but he earns it. Like everything feels earned, so that at the end you're like, oh, Superman's gonna die from cancer, but it's like, no, it just feels like he transcended to a higher being. Like he's just different. Like he's in the stars. He's one of them. So like you can say he kind of looks in that like godlike, but it's a different type of feel. Like it just feels more like an aura
Their tones
versus a statue to bow towards.
Yeah. Definitely a different tone.
For sure.
And the way they like portray certain shots, I guess the way certain panels are drawn versus certain imagery is captured on the lens.
Yeah. It is, and it's all about that focus to me, I think, where you look at how Man of Steel, and I want to say maybe some other projects too, but I know Man of Steel is mainly the main one that leaned into that godlike, Christ-like figure too much, to the point where people were like, I don't know how to look at this Superman and want to and feel inspired by him. But here he does feel more than normal, and we still feel inspired by him. Like we look at him and we're like, man, or people look at him throughout this entire book and they're like, oh, that's what we want to be. The Superman, again, going back to the Superman from the future, how they just look at him and they're like, you are the golden rule of what we want to be. And they do that. So I think it's very interesting that they go from the narrative point of Hercules, especially since he is a demigod and he
Yeah.
is more relatable. Like demigods typically in mythology are more relatable because they are half human.
Right.
And same for Superman, where he's not human, but he's a more powerful being in a human world.
Yeah.
And how he juggles that.
And one thing before we move on to the next, I do like at the end they kind of cap it where Lois is sitting on that bench and you know that Superman's in the sun, right? Restoring the heart of the sun. It almost feels like where it's a rainy day or you've been outside and you walk out and you feel the heat of the sun on your face and you're like, that's Superman. You know what I mean? Like you get that and like he feels like he's here type of thing. Like his essence and presence never went away, which when you kind of look at the cancer aspect of this and someone dying from that, you do kind of get that with maybe some your favorite item or something that they had or something that like you don't want to let go type of thing too, which is I think for me, like even now, like as I continue to talk about it, like you feel it to where you always remember. And there's something about them that just won't die. It's always going to be there. And that's extremely, extremely inspirational in so many ways. Again, that's just a different feel from what we're used to with some other things. But that again, for me is just, I very much connected with the end of this book.
I agree. A lot to connect with in this book. And again, kind of like we've said, in terms of every other comic book chat that we've had in Super May, if you haven't, definitely go read this because we can only tell you so much about it. And we are barely scratching the surface. And in all honesty, this is the longest series out of all of it, out of all the other books. So we can't, if we went into every issue, we would be here for honestly 6 hours. So definitely go read it for yourself. Enjoy the ride that is All Star Superman because it does have a lot to offer you. Even if you do listen to us and go read it after, I don't think you'll be spoiled by anything. There's still a lot of ups and downs and fun all around to be had with the book. So, keeping that in mind, though, and Lou, I'll throw this back over to you. Having read All Star Superman, what do you want for them to take into James Gunn's Superman from this book?
Yeah, I think we'll all kind of agree on a few of these. I think I'm definitely on the front of like the type of Lex Luthor that this was and like his philosophy, kind of what he was doing, where he wants to go. I think for me, a big thing though is probably that moment with Pa Kent, something along those lines of where he's doing good, not necessarily a time travel, but I think they can adapt where he's continuously on the go. He left Smallville, he left the farm, he didn't want to leave, and they kind of pushed him to go do it. He goes to the big city, he's doing his thing, comes back, and maybe it's that scene where she says, "I clean your boots" or something like that, and he's trying to save whatever that scene is, and maybe something does happen to Pa Kent, and he has to choose. And this event is something like we talked about where it's inevitable, it's going to happen, but for him to kind of walk through those emotions, I think it's very James Gunn. I think it's something that David Cornsweet would excel at. This is obviously an emotional Superman from the trailer and the teaser. So for me, that relationship with Mom Pa Kent, I think they could really pull the emotions that Superman has here, and some of the things that he got in his roots, what he was taught, what he was told. There's some panels we're probably going to throw on socials, highlight some of these things, but I think that'd be a nice blend to kind of call out here. But also, we know that the fortress exists. So what does he have in there? What experiences he had with his close friends and stuff like that too. But those are kind of in the top three. So that's be out there over to you, man.
Man, Jimmy Olsen Doomsday, baby. No, I'm kidding.
What are you doing with that gun, Jimmy?
On a curveball on him.
No, I think I would like to see that. I really like this Fortress of Solitude and would definitely kind of go on exactly what you were ending off with, the oil of wanting to see that in like that style of Fortress of Solitude in the movie. I know we've seen a little glimpse of it. I haven't seen much from the trailer, but show me all these crazy rooms of like what he's collected so far, like just open it up for the future. So I'll be like, oh, maybe we could imagine like certain stuff going over there. But I would like to see him save. I would like to see the Reagan panel replicated in the movie as well, of him just saving someone that's just kind of like on the edge of death. Um, I think that would hit the tone for the movie very hard. And maybe if they have him do that where he like first goes back to Metropolis after like Superman's been away for a couple days, I think that moment will hit even harder. So that will be like kind of like his first act back and just realizing that's what he does. What he does is just saving the everyday people and just being a human and a friend to those who need a friend.
Yeah. I would also say my one big thing that I want is really the Lex aspect out of this one, where I think the last one that kind of got it was all for all seasons, got it really well, but I think this one takes it above and beyond.
Certified hater.
Yeah, into that like A tier level hater, but also the arch
He was
villain.
hating on him to Clark. And that's
Yeah.
what I loved about I loved that interaction. He's like,
Yeah.
oh, Superman this, Superman that, when he's literally talking to Clark.
Yes. I would love to see how that relationship plays out between Clark and Lex if they get to do that. But just overall, having Lex be that foil to Superman in every way, where it's like Superman is the embodiment of kindness and love and everything that's good, and Lex is just not. He's just the total opposite.
Yeah.
And how, despite having the most intellectually strong mind out of all of them, is the one who can't get that, who can't have his way.
Yeah.
And I think if they show that really well, if they want to do something like this a couple movies down the line, where you do have Lex get one up finally on Superman, it'll hit a lot harder because we'll have seen the full journey of it starting in this Superman.
Honorable mention, I do think this is probably going to be the closest Clark that we're going to see on screen.
Yes.
He seems a little goofier in a sense. And I wouldn't put it past him to kind of pull, especially in that jail scene where he's like using his powers and he's like, oh, crazy security, blah, 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 blah. There's going to be an earthquake. And it's like, stamp, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. But he seems pretty fun, kind of go lucky. But I'm curious to see if they do take this Clark and this Superman. The Superman Lois interactions are very different from some of the Clark Lois type of interactions, right? The relationship is different. I think we saw that in the trailer of kind of he's able to flip those gears, and it's going to be like, who's the real version? Is Superman Clark Kent, or is Clark Kent Superman type of thing? So I think that dynamic will be pretty cool to see them kind of adapt on screen, and I think they could really pull a lot from this to make this probably feel the most. I think this will translate the best for a James Gunn film.
Yeah, he does know how to juggle those kinds of relationships really well too. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do. That's the end of Superman.
Dang,
flew by.
Am I sad now? I'm kind of sad a little bit.
Yeah, I am too. But I mean, look, at the end of it, this month has just been a celebration of Superman, the character, and all these comic book stories. And ultimately, if you've read them along with us, or if you read them after the fact and you get to see what we see in them, then that's awesome, because that's all we want people to do, is hear our videos and then go read these for themselves. Because without these works, we don't get the films, which honestly makes the comic books much more important too. So, these aren't the only stories that Superman has. He has so many other stories. A character with so many years of history is bound to have so many more, and he does. So, as SB flies a couple of them. But for real, go find some for yourself if you haven't. Up in the Sky, Birthright, just to name a few. Unchained, so many other great Superman stories, and we're just scratching the surface. So yeah, over there, that Morrison omnibus. So
yeah, awesome read. Superman was fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
Oh.
that's next month.
Oh.
But
Fantastic Foon.
oh man. Well, everybody, this has been Super May. We've had a great time. If you want to hear more from us, then make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube and wherever you listen to all your major podcasts. Everybody, we have been your favorite trio of hosts, signing Super May off, Super Spider Brando, Lou, and myself, Hero Scroll. Everybody, just make sure you continue to do the three most important things that we all need to keep doing. We need to keep watching. You need to keep reading, in this case, especially keep reading and keep nerding out about Superman as we continue on the road to Superman July 11th. We will see you next time.